Hey everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Mic'd Podcast. I'm Mike, a hairdresser of over 20 years. One of the best parts of my job is the conversations that I get to have with all of my clients. We talk about anything and everything and invite you to listen in as we get mic'd up for today's conversation. Today in the chair we had Kristen, who is a 52-year-old successful doctor, but she wasn't always a success. She shares her story about being a former drug addict and changed her course and now helps the people who are where she was a long time ago. I hope you enjoy this episode. I'm excited for you to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming and spending some of your day with us.
Love spending my days with you, Mike.
Well, thank you. So to get started, I'm just going to give my little background about you, because the whole reason that I wanted you to be on this is because I truly, and I tell you this every time I do your hair, but I think you're one of the most inspirational and most amazing people that I've ever met. One, because I know where you've been and I know where you are now, and the journey that you have taken to get from life of an addict to now being doctor, helping people with addiction is rare. Not a lot of people make it. It's one of those things that I think, because it is a rare success story, it's one that's really inspiring, so that people that really do have shit going on in their lives, there's hope. And so I wanted to have you on to really just talk about your story. Like, where did it begin? Where did you make that little switch? And once you made that switch, how did you get to where you are today? And then at the end, let's talk about like how good or whatever amazing life is now.
Aww.
So that's your little introduction.
That's me?
Dr.
Okay.
Kristen.
That's great.
So, yeah.
Well, that's super generous. That's really nice of you to say, because I know you know a lot of amazing people. I know some of them that you know, and they're amazing people. So thank you for that introduction. Yeah. You know, I think it's unique with you specifically because you're one of the few people in my life outside of my family who have like really watched and seen me through the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
So that's amazing. I think seeing that progression is just one of my favorite things to do, and I get to see people explode into a different life, even outside of addiction, just in general. But so yeah, I mean, my story starts with, kind of didn't have any of these issues when I grew up. Like grew up in a really. You want me to go all the way back to my childhood?
Yeah, I mean, so like, where did you start? Where were you raised? Like, what was your youth like?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So I grew up out in Los Angeles County, and grew up in a great family. I was a middle child of 5 kids. I had loving parents. Of course, looking back now, I would say they were emotionally detached. That's just kind of the way they are and how they were raised. And
like they were there, but they didn't really ever. It was like a don't ask, don't tell kind of a thing. Like,
we didn't
as long
really.
as you're good, we're good with
exactly.
it.
That's just kind of how we were raised, and we were all good, right? So there was really no reason to, dive into things and talk about issues and emotions and things like this. But if I'm looking at my identifying how my childhood was, I would say my childhood was great. I had a good childhood. I had loving parents. I had a lot of experiences and opportunities. As an adult, I can see that. As a kid, I actually thought I was poor. This is a kind of a funny part of my story because I really always thought that we were struggling with money, and I was always really sensitive to making sure I didn't spend too much money, didn't ask for too much things, and all of this. And the truth is, we lived in LA County, overlooking the skyline of LA, with a pool and a backyard and this amazing house at the end of a cul-de-sac. And Country Club was right down the street, which of course we were members of, and we went to, and we, went out to eat all the time, and we had a houseboat and a boat, and spent a lot of time up at Lake Powell, and just all of this stuff. But so looking back on it as an adult, I'm like, oh my gosh, we were not poor, but I thought we were.
Why, as a kid, did you think you were poor?
So my parents used to say right before Christmas, hey, we don't have a lot of money this year, so don't plan on anything. And I think that was like their way of hyping it up. Like, they're going to pretend like we're not going to get anything for Christmas. And then every year, of course, we'd come down and there would be like hundreds of presents under the tree, just a ton of presents. Maybe not hundreds, but kind of, because my dad used to do things like wrap bubble gum, we had like so many little presents, and but we had the big things too, and we definitely were not without. But I think as a kid, when you hear that, I had this concrete thinking of, oh my gosh, we're poor, can't spend any money. This even like went into high school, where I'm like, hey, I can't ask for lunch money, so I'm gonna just, go out to lunch with my friends, and we'd go to like a pizza place, and I wouldn't get anything because I wouldn't have any money, and I would wait for them to finish their pizza, and then I would go around and eat the pizza crusts. I was just like that kid, and it was fine with me. Like, I was like, this is what we do. Like, I'm not a kid who has money for pizza, and it's kind of funny that my brother, who was a year older than me, and he definitely knew we weren't poor, because he was the one who was asking for, all these expensive trips and Broadway tickets and, all this stuff. And somehow my brother knew that we weren't poor, but he didn't tell me. That really plays into nothing to do with my addiction. It's just more of an interesting childhood perspective. Once you become older and you look back, you're like, yeah, I definitely got that wrong. But
you had the things you needed. You were taken care of.
Totally.
But a family that was...
But I will say that it probably played into me getting married very young, because I, was like, oh, I need to get off my parents', books as fast as I can, because they're really struggling. I just still had this like internal, I need to get out on my own and be independent as fast as possible.
But so you had that all the way up until you got married.
Yep.
Like thinking, oh, that's crazy.
Yep. And it was interesting. So anyway, got married young, barely 19. Had no business getting married, but I did. And married a pretty nice guy, actually. Just wasn't my guy.
Yeah.
And anyway, we ended up being married, finished college, got through college, the whole thing, and then...
And what were you going to college for?
So I was at BYU. So I moved out to Utah. That's when I moved out to Utah.
To go to college. I moved out
to Utah when I was 17 and started... didn't know, I didn't have any direction, didn't know what I was doing. Again, looking back, I had a very, very intelligent older brother. He was the star, the smartest, the best athlete, all of this. And I was, I'm sure, just as smart and just as good of an athlete, but back then I didn't really see that. I was more in the shadows of, the middle child. And this isn't a always me. Like, I really did have a great childhood. This is more in looking back on, where some of my false beliefs came from, and my lack of confidence at the time, because, really I was capable of doing whatever I wanted to, but I didn't have that confidence to do it. And I went to BYU, and I was thinking about going into nursing because I thought that would be really cool. And I remember showing up to like a meeting on, hey, here's what it takes to get into the nursing program at BYU. And they were like, so this program's really hard. And I'm like, oh, it's not for me then, because, I'm not that good. I'm not that smart. I can't do hard stuff. So decided not to do the nursing and went to sports medicine. So I had been an athlete. I was on a swim team. I swam on a U.S. swim team for like 8 years and was very competitive, did very well.
This is before school, though, right? Like
this was during junior high and high school, through those times. But once I got to college, I was like so sick of being underwater. I was just ready for a social life and didn't want to do it anymore. So I had, just decided to stop swimming.
So then I'm curious, like this is going to be, but going back to the childhood before you moved, because were you raised LDS then?
I was raised
BYU?
LDS.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Because I was like, most people don't just go to BYU if they're not.
Not very
LDS,
many. That's true. Yeah, I forgot about that part.
It's very rare. So
yeah, so my dad was the bishop. I was very much involved in all my church activities. I loved going to all the church stuff growing up, like not church itself, but all the activities around it. Had all my church friends, loved it. I hung out with my church friends more than I did my school friends. That was just my life. And that was fine with me. I had a great childhood that way too. I didn't really ever feel like I just thought that was normal,
But so in going to BYU, it was like, hey, look, I'm following the perfect LDS.
Yeah, especially when you're raised LDS in California. I don't know how it is now, but back then it was like, this is what we do. We all go to BYU if you can.
Yep.
And so that was just always the goal. And I totally wanted to go to BYU. Like, it was super exciting to, again, hang out, like, with my church friends. I'm going to get new church friends and, and just engage in that lifestyle. And the truth is, I was in that lifestyle. And so I was really comfortable around other LDS people. So going to BYU was easy for me. Like, that was really comfortable.
Okay.
So anyway, I ended up doing a sports medicine major. I got a bachelor's in athletic training, sports medicine, and just loved that. But I was already married. Like, I got married after my freshman year. Let's see, I did my freshman year and then one semester of my sophomore year and was married.
Okay.
Met and married him in 3 months. That kind of story.
Oh, yeah.
Classic BYU. Again, I don't know if they still do that. But
BYU work.
Then, that's just what people did.
Oh, yeah.
And it just blows my mind. Like, I would freak out if my kids were doing that. But, my parents didn't say anything, and nobody really said anything. That's just what we did. And so anyway, ended up having one child had a son with my first husband, and again, just nice guy, just wasn't for me, and ended up kind of having an epiphany when I was in the hospital with my son, and looking at my newborn and looking at my then husband and going, this is not the life that I want. And that's a sucky time to realize that.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh my gosh, what have I done? Like, I love my son from the second I saw him, and that was the best thing that's ever happened to me, besides my daughter, obviously. Yeah. No favorites here, but it was really in the hospital when I had this, like, oh my gosh, I don't think I can do this the rest of my life. Because when we had first gotten married, it was, I did not want to marry him. Like, I cried the night before. I was really upset about marrying him and knew I wasn't ready. But my pride was like, can't say no now. You know, I've heard this story a million times since then. I know you have too. But it was real. Like, I absolutely could not tell people that I had made a mistake. That was not happening. And so once you get married, and I want to say like in the LDS religion, but really like in any religion or just in general, you're not supposed to get divorced. You're supposed to like stay married, right? Like, that's our societal agreement is, you know, we don't do that. So once we got married, that was my thought. It was like, I'm never going to get divorced. I will just figure it out and live with this guy for the rest of my life. And again, nice guy. Like, there wasn't anything, you know, like that I could say that I was in this bad relationship or anything, other than I didn't want to be in it.
But so you have this epiphany or whatever, this thought while you're sitting there, like, what do you do with it? Like, where do you go from there? Because I know that situation. Like, it's hard. So
it
do
was
you say
the
something
beginning.
immediately? Do you stay in it and just kind of try to work it out? Like, where does it go?
Yeah, it was the beginning of the end of that relationship. You know, and he knew, like, the night before we got married, I said, I don't want to marry you. I had told him, and he's, you know, just said, you have cold feet. It's, you know, it's going to be fine. And to his credit, like, that's true. People get cold feet, right? Like, they kind of freak out, and, you know, I don't blame him for convincing me to do it anyway. I probably would have, regardless of what he said.
Yeah.
But after we had our son, this was like 7 years into our marriage, I started pulling away, you know, just emotionally, physically, you know, just wasn't, I just didn't have it in me to do it anymore. And yada, 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 second husband comes into the picture. We just jump over all that stuff. And so I was primed for like,
yada, yada.
This is not going to happen. Like, I can't do this anymore. I was turned into the villain by his family, and I don't blame them either. Like, you know, that was kind of a crappy thing for me to do. Like, you know, they're seeing their son struggling, and now we have this baby, and now I'm bouncing on this relationship. Like, that sucks. I get it.
Yeah.
But I just couldn't do it anymore. And so, you know, there was a lot of guilt and shame coming into my life about this point, where I was just felt so bad about myself. And I had graduated from BYU by this point, and I had started working as a personal trainer. That was one of the first jobs I got outside of college, was working for Gold's Gym. They called me up and said, hey, do you want to be the head of the personal training department? And, you know, yeah, sure, let's do this. You know, so I started that job and kind of got into the gym scene for a little while. And that's the yada, yada, yada of the second husband.
Yeah.
But this really wasn't so much about the next guy. This was about me kind of really, for the first time in my life, taking a look at myself and trying to make a decision of who I want to be and what I want to do and what's important to me. All those things in life that I had really just neglected, not thought about. Nobody even told me I should be considering these things. I had always been just told this is what we believe and this is how we do it. Mm-hmm. But it was through that self-discovery that, you know, this is the part of the story where you're supposed to like soar, but that didn't happen to me. Like this is the part of my story where I started to explore, and part of my exploration led to a lot of suffering. My second, person who would eventually be my second husband, we started dating, and what came out was that he was smoking weed. Maybe I knew he was drinking some alcohol or something. Okay, so I am 27 at this point, 26. I've never had a lick of alcohol.
Nothing at this point. You've been clean and
nothing. I'd never been around it. I had never done it. I had no desire to do it. Like, it was just, I grew up in a very LDS bubble that, I was just really safe from all that stuff. It wasn't just that, though, because I went to a high school in, LA County where, of course there were a lot of drugs, a lot of partying, a lot of drinking, but I was never really around it because I had my church friends, but then I was also a very competitive athlete, and my coach was, that was my life. Like, if it would have been offered to me, I don't think I would have taken it. And not only that, but I was, one of like 3 Mormons in my high school, the other one being my brother, and everybody knew that I was Mormon, and it was such like everybody knew I didn't drink. Everybody knew I didn't do drugs. And so they really respected that, and nobody ever offered it or brought it around me. People didn't invite me to parties because of that. It was like, that was just fine with me. That's what I did.
Yeah. See, I always felt like growing up LDS, like outside of Utah, all of your friends knew what, it was weird. They knew what a Mormon did, and so they never offered it. It wasn't until you came here that they're like, hey, do you want a drink? And you're like, nah, I don't want one. I'm Mormon. And they're like, well, so am I. And so then you're like, well, if you can, then I guess I can too.
So, oh, we do that? Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, exactly.
But
yeah, that's exactly what this was. This was, this guy was also raised Mormon, and, Utah Mormon turns out a little different, at least. I shouldn't make that generalization.
No.
I know that's not true, but like in his case it was.
Yeah.
And, by that point, I had, I liked him, and I was, kind of dating him, and find out that he's smoking weed and drinking and all of his stuff. And I'm like, I'm not tolerating that. Like, that's not okay for me. And I distinctly remember a conversation on the phone with him where he basically challenged me and my beliefs as far as, you're the one who's wrong. This is fine, and you're the one with the problem. You're judgmental, and you're all this kind of stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, wow, maybe I am. And I was really, in that exploration phase of my life. So I'm like, yeah, let me take another look at that. And that kind of ended up being what allowed me to be curious enough to be like, yeah, let me try some of that. And I don't remember exactly the day or the time or whatever, but I do remember the first time trying it going, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, how did I live my whole life away from this like special, amazing part of life? Like,
and that first time it was weed, marijuana? Or?
Okay, so really I'm blending 2 stories because I can't remember what I first used.
Okay.
It was probably marijuana.
Okay.
It might have been alcohol. I don't know. It was one of those 2 things. But I do remember really liking it and being like, hey, this is really cool. This feeling is great. And almost like I was mad at my family, church, society, whatever, that kept me away from this amazing feeling all these years. Like that feeling of like, man, I've been really duped. This is so cool. I love this. Can't believe I went my whole life without this. I finally found what I've been looking for, And that story actually becomes more poignant when I had my first opiate. So weed and alcohol, I could take it or leave it. I was kind of like, yeah, this is a great feeling. Now I got to get to work, right?
Yeah.
Then I found out that the guy I was dating was using pills. And again, it was just kind of like slow and steady, where I'm like accepting. Now I'm accepting of the weed part, because if you can't beat them, join them, right? Yeah. So I'm drinking a little bit. I'm using a little bit of marijuana. And the pills come up, and I'm like, okay, no, this is way too much. Like, we're not doing pills. This is addiction stuff. We're not going to go down this route. And I will throw in that this relationship was very toxic and abusive, really from early on. And there was an incident where we had gotten into an altercation, and let's just say that there was a lot of toxic stuff going on at the time. Okay. And I was really upset, and he said, hey, do you want to take one of these? It'll help you feel better. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. Just give me whatever. I was just so upset. And that was the first time I took an opiate.
So do you think that it was because of the mood? It's like a perfect storm of events. It's like, it's there being offered. You're in a space that's just like, I don't care. And then you're like, here we go. And
I think that's exactly what happened, but I'm guessing that it would have happened one way or another eventually, because I was in a relationship with somebody who was using, and despite my, hey, I'm gonna help this guy through his addiction. He's had such a hard life. I'm gonna help him, and I'm strong, and I haven't used any of that stuff, so I'm gonna teach him how to live life without any of this stuff. That was my original goal. Okay. But what ended up happening is I just became an addict. So that first opiate was, I remember it vividly. I don't remember the other stuff so much, but the addict stuff was this is the best feeling in the world, and okay. I don't ever want to not feel this. Really?
So it's that from one use, it's like, yep, I want to keep that.
The very first time.
And then you just, I guess this is me speaking from somebody that's not, I've never been an addict, except a Diet Dr. Pepper, but is that common? Is that people try it once and then it's like, that's...
I've heard that story and that explanation multiple times in people who are in recovery, because obviously I've been around a lot of that.
It's not the case that people will try it once and then be like, it was good, I'm done.
But everybody's story is different into addiction. Yeah, okay. That's what I was just going to say, is that there's plenty of those stories too, where they didn't like it, it made them sick, they hated it, all of this. And so, but my story was I loved it, and then it was just kind of game on after that point. I'm now, I can go through emotional pain of a toxic relationship, a toxic abusive relationship, or I can take this pill that takes all that pain away and feels really, really good. Okay. So the choice became pretty easy for me. I wanted to feel really good. Who wants emotional pain? So who wants to admit that they're allowing themselves to be in an abusive relationship? Yeah. Right?
So at that point, opioids, that was it. That was the choice. That was it.
It's to the end, it was my drug of choice. So that led to a 10-year run of heavy drug use, substance abuse.
Was it a daily thing, or was it like just
daily thing? It was an hourly thing.
Wow.
It was constant. It was all the time. Towards the end, I was using. Back then, it was OxyContin was the thing. They ruined it for addicts and made it so that you can't abuse it as well. But that was kind of like very last part of my addiction was, I had a drug dealer. I'm so at this point let's go back to the relationship. So I end up divorcing the second guy after my parents kind of come in and save me. They came over, kind of saw what the abuse was going on, and my mom pulled me aside and said, "Hey, is he abusing you?" And I had denied it up till this point. I had never admitted it to anybody. And for some reason in that moment, I just said, yeah. And that was it. Like, my dad went upstairs, my sweet, meek, humble father, who he had never yelled at me in my life, goes up there, screams at my husband to get out. And anyway, that's how I got away from that relationship, because I did not have the strength to do it myself. I was just in such a bad, dark place. It was a horrible way to live. We had a child. I forgot to mention that.
Oh yeah.
I had my daughter with my second husband, and that was based on, I'm willing to have a child with you if we stop using together. And so that was the commitment that we had both agreed upon. Like, let's stop using and we'll have a baby. So we stopped using, and I got pregnant. Thought everything was great. Everything was actually going really good at that time. And we were both working as personal trainers at the gym. And I remember I was probably 5 or 6 months pregnant at the time, and I saw him walk into the gym, and I saw the look in his eye that he was high.
Uh-huh.
And
So
I was
you
done.
knew.
I was just done. I didn't have the strength to get out of the relationship, but like, that's what changed my heart of like, I'm done trying to help this guy. I'm done trying to fix him. I was so codependent, so toxic from my side too. It was just an ugly relationship, ugly situation. And then I had my sweet daughter, but she was about a year old when that incident happened with my dad, where he kicked him out. And, my parents were so relieved because they always knew something was wrong. So, now everything's going to be fine for Kristen because, that bad man's out of her life, and she'll do fine now, right?
And is that how it went?
So
That everything all of a sudden was like, yay, happy little life.
So no, because bad man left, but I was left with this really ugly addiction that I hadn't told anyone about. I'd really kept it a secret for this whole time. I had been a total closet drinker, weed smoker, pill popper, like this was, what I did all day, every day. I started pretty quickly after I had my daughter. I wouldn't say it took long.
Yeah.
I was I had a C-section, and so I was on opiates in the hospital, and my addiction just shot right back up. As soon as I got those opiates again, it was game on.
Yeah.
But anyway, after second divorce, it took me another year of really finding, just nosediving. If anything bad could happen, it happened to me that year. I went and got a job working corporate sales at Gold's Gym. They were nice enough to allow me to come back there and help me out. And I was just a mess. I didn't always look a mess, but I was a total addict. I was using, drinking, whatever I could every day. I was also miserable. So got fired from that job. Long story short, I had what I wanted to be like. How you always want to have a great quitting story.
Yeah.
Where you flip a table on your way out. So I tried to do that. I came to a
You
meeting.
tried to flip a table?
Oh, well, you know, like that version. I came to a meeting totally high, right? I had these big old Elton John glasses on. And my boss says to me, take your glasses off. And I'm like, no. And he says, get out. Get your stuff and get out of here. They were sick of me by that point. So I leave the table. It's just like, this is in front of like 20 people. I leave the table, walk down the hall, like things are flying all over the place with papers and pins and all this kind of stuff. I grab my stuff off of the table and walk out, you know, just thinking I'm having this glory moment. I get a call about 3 minutes later from the cops saying that if I don't return the laptop that is company property, that they're going to arrest me.
Oh, no.
So I actually had to turn around, walk back in, like totally humiliated, totally ashamed, give them my laptop, and then, you know, with my head down, walk out. It was not the glory quitting story that I want. It wasn't a quitting story anyway. I got fired. So anyway, you know, I ended up going to jail. My parents tried to get me into the Betty Ford Clinic and on a family vacation to Palm Springs, and my mom's. This whole episode could be about this one story, so I'll keep it really brief. But I went down to this family vacation and I was wasted, like I was a mess, and my mom woke me up one morning and she's like, hey, there's this guy I want you to meet. And I'm like, really? Is he hot? Like, what are we doing here? And she's like, no, you got to get in the car. I just want you to meet this guy. I'm like, oh, okay. So I get into the car and I'm driving around, and all of a sudden, you know how like you have those, the dog in the car all of a sudden realizes he's going to the vet instead of the park. So I start seeing these signs for like Betty Ford Clinic. I'm like, wait, where are we going? She's like, no, it's just somebody I want you to talk to. I'm like, oh my gosh, Mom, you're taking me to Betty Ford? No. So anyway, I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to go to treatment at that point. You know, I went and talked to the people. I'm like, I don't even have a problem. My mom's just too Mormon, and they think any amount of alcohol is bad, and that they're the problem, and all this kind of stuff. And anyway, spent a night in jail for a DUI. I'm not proud of this, by the way. That was terrible. And also, jail really sucks. It's really, really sucky. If you think it's bad, it's worse than that.
Yeah.
But it didn't stop me. I got out of jail. I went in front of the judge. I got let out. I was barefoot at the time. I walked home and I called my drug dealer. Got more drugs. Like I was in so deep. So finally what got me into treatment is my mom was so sick of coming out and trying to save me and help me. My parents were enabling me. My mom, one of these times, said, you know what, I'm not leaving. And I'm like, fine, you can stay. Stay as long as you want.
Stay with you?
Like with
live
me.
with you?
Yeah. And she's, you know, ruining my high, right? Eventually I start using again when she's there. And I'm like getting mad at my mom and all this kind of stuff. Fine, I'll go to treatment. So I agreed to show up to a treatment center that they had found out in Napa Valley at St. Helena Hospital. And
so you feel like you agreed because your mom was there living with you?
it is exactly why I went to treatment.
I can't do anything else, so I might as well just go to this treatment.
She wouldn't leave.
That's awesome. Good.
So I'm like,
go Mom.
I know, right? No, I tell my parents every year on my sobriety date, like, you saved my life. Thank you so much. I would not be here without you. So my parents, so I showed up to the hospital, and actually I flew out there. My dad, who was the stake president at the time, which, you know, if you're not LDS, that's like, my family's very Mormon. You know, 35-year-old daughter is out on his porch smoking and, jonesing and everything else. And, he doesn't know what to do with me. And he ends up dropping me off at rehab. And I say, pick me up in 3 days. I just need 3 days. I'm willing to go for 3 days. Don't actually need to be here. I just need to figure out how to appropriately use my medications. Because, I had this whole trick of, that I had been going to doctors to get these prescription opiates because I had these headaches and I was in so much pain and all this bull crap that was, just, I think I started to believe it, but nobody else did, right? So I go to treatment, pick me up in 3 days, Dad. My dad's like, yeah, okay. And I'm sitting there in the hospital. I do a detox first, and sitting there, they do the people from the rehab come and see me, and they give me some pamphlets or whatever, and I'm like, yeah, thanks. This is not really for me. I'm not really an addict. I just, my family, blah, 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 this story I've been telling. And they leave some pamphlets, and they're like, okay, well, here's this. So I'm like, whatever. So I yank open one of the pamphlets and, kind of like mockingly start reading it. And the first pamphlet is the 12 steps. And I had never read the 12 steps up until that point. I had heard of it, like I knew it existed, but I was like, didn't know anything about that. And I am sitting there in my hospital bed, and I have this, step 1, step 2, step 3. By the time I get to step 3, I have this intense feeling come over me. What we would call a spiritual awakening now that I know the verbiage for it, but at the time I was like, what is this? Had this realization that these words were divinely inspired for me to be written at that time, on that day, in this exact location. It was supposed to happen exactly this way, and that this was the answer for me to stop all the suffering that had been going on in my life. I'm telling you, it was the most powerful thing that I've ever experienced.
Wow.
In my life. And I can't explain that. I can't explain it because nobody had told me that, hey, this might happen, or hey, watch out for a spiritual awakening. But I'm telling you that's what happened. And I kept reading the steps, and I thought, this is the answer for you, Kristen. If you want to stop all the insanity, this is what you have to do.
So at that point, though, because you've been sober for a little bit.
12 hours? I'm in detox.
You're in detox. It was
day 2 in detox. I drank the day I went in.
Did you, at that point, are you sober enough that you're or is it, do you still feel like there's the influence of it that makes it more of a spiritual, does that make sense?
Yeah. Honestly, I don't even remember if they were giving me medications in the hospital or not, because I had done this whole, I'm not sick. And so I would, get out of my hospital bed and go do lunges down the hallway. And I was doing, dips off of my hospital bed, trying to, work out and show them how not sick I am, So I don't even know if they gave me any medications while I was there. I have no idea. I definitely did not feel like I was under the influence of anything at that moment. This was a very profound,
very different feeling than
anything I had experienced. Divinely inspired. God wrote this to be read by me today. That's how I can explain that. Okay. So I ended up going into the rehab program, and I remember sitting in a group of, there was probably 30 of us in there. And I remember one of the doctors coming and doing a lecture, and she says, only 3 of you will be sober in 5 years. Only 3 of you out of the 30. Wow. And I looked around and I said, who are the other 2? because I'm doing this. Like, I'm done. It was so powerful. Like, it was everything in that moment in that hospital bed changed my attitude. Like, I did not want to be there. Remember, I told my dad, pick me up in 3 days.
Yeah.
And here I am saying, show me what to do. Like, I'm doing this. I was 100% in, 110% in. You want to go, they tell me to go to 90 meetings in 90 days. I went to a meeting every day or almost every day for a year and a half.
Oh, wow.
Don't get in a relationship for the first year. I didn't get in a relationship for like 7 years. I really, everything that they told me, I did it. Get a sponsor, I got a sponsor, I started working the steps, I worked the steps, I did all of it. So when I left rehab, I was really solid. Like, I was not about to go back to that life. And there wasn't like there was anything in rehab that made it different. It all went back to that day that I read those steps, that I was ready for a change and ready to do something different. So now I came back from rehab and I had this huge pile of shit to take care of at home, right? I had no job. I was not even employable. I had 2 children that I hadn't been a very good mother to, because as much as you want to when you're an addict.
And how old are your kids at this point?
So my son was 9, my daughter was 2.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I just one day at a time got myself out of that mess. And I'll tell you, I owe a lot of this to my parents, because they really supported me when I needed them the most. I remember my dad came out to rehab. He'd come out and see me every week and do the family sessions. And my family doesn't know about addiction. Like, that's not their jam at all. They don't know anybody else who does this. They're not comfortable with that. And they just completely embraced me, showed up for me when I needed them the most. Like, this was the time in my life where I really learned to value the love of a parent. Because I would do the same thing for my kids, but you don't really, I hadn't up until that point really experienced that unconditional love until then.
Well, and as a parent, we always hear like there's something powerful about just showing up. Like there's been videos of little kids walking through their like elementary school performance, and they're looking for their parents, and the second they see their parents, it's like change in attitude. So a parent showing up really is a powerful thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. This is when they did it for me. Up till this point, I don't really need them. They're fine, but I got this. And no, I don't got this. Like, we need people. This is when I started really, back to the whole, who am I? What do I want to be? What's my purpose? Recovery is when that really started. Addiction got me down to wiping away all the bullshit that I had created in my life. And recovery was the driving force to me discovering, hey, what really matters to you? What is actually important to you? So one day at a time, man, I put in a lot of work to stay clean and sober. In July, I got 16 years. So
congratulations, that's awesome.
Thanks. It is awesome.
Is it still like, because now you're in the position where you're helping the people that have the same thing. Do you ever find it like you see the drugs that they're using or the alcohol or any of that, is it tempting still? Like, I've heard
That's a good question.
I've heard through addicts that sometimes it's like, ooh,
Yep.
I still just maybe just a little. But
Yep.
do you have those desires at all anymore, or no?
So that was something that I was worried about, and I had a bachelor's in sports medicine. I decided to go back to school after rehab and become a licensed substance abuse counselor. I did a program up at the U, and I was like, hey, you know what? They told me I had this disease and I don't know much about it, so I'm just going to go learn about it. And I spent a year in that program realizing, oh crap, I actually really like school and I'm still pretty good at it. So then I went back and got a bachelor's degree. I went back and got a second bachelor's degree in nursing. Remember how when I used to not have confidence when I was 18? Once I was in recovery started giving me a huge amount of confidence. If I can stop using drugs, I can do anything. Do you have any idea how hard it is to stop using a substance that has become your whole being? Everything you do, every minute of every single day. If you can overcome that, you're unstoppable. So I went and did this bachelor's in nursing at UVU. Then I went and did a doctorate program as a psychiatric nurse practitioner at the University of Utah. When I went back to nursing, I thought the same thing that you just asked me. It was like, ooh, maybe I shouldn't be around opiates. Like as a nurse, I'm gonna be giving out stuff that I used to abuse. Like, what if that's a problem?
Well, and that's the other thing. Like, is there laws against like,
Yeah.
well, you've got this track record,
Yeah.
so nope, you can't go down this route, which
Yeah.
I think would be.
Yeah, that's a good law, right?
Yeah. I mean, well, I don't know if it's a good law because that would have prevented you from being
Yeah,
where
right.
you are, and you really are amazing at what you do now. So had that been something there, yeah, it would have been, but I understand the logic behind it.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it makes sense, but I did my preceptorship as a nurse in the emergency room. So we were using a lot of opiates, and I remember telling my sponsor, like, listen, recovery is number one. Nursing, yeah, I want to be a nurse. That would be so awesome. But that's like a side note. That's not the most important thing in my life. If I at any time feel like I can't do this, I'm out. And I absolutely meant it, and I believe that I would have stopped. I really do. I really think that I would have quit, would have given it all up if I would have even had a craving or a thought that I was going to use it or abuse it. But I just didn't. You know, there's a promise.
That's a huge
There's
blessing.
a promise in the 12 steps that talks about a reprieve and being able to live life without that constant craving and that constant desire. And I was able to achieve that. I got that in my life. And, you know, still to this day, I mean, actually as a prescriber, you're not really even around opiates. The nurse I don't give out opiates. I'm not around that. I can prescribe it, but it's the nurse who, you know, has it at their disposal. But yeah, to come to a point where, and I'll tell you, I did have to do a lot of, as a matter of fact, I still have to do, if I ever get a new job, here's all the explanations. Yes, I have had legal charges. Yes, I have had to do this, that, and the other. Here are all my court dates, all my explanations, everything like this, because, you know, it's part of my past. It's what it is. It turns out like the legal status is, and the boards are very forgiving if you're willing to do something about it and show that you're serious. It also helped that I was, you know, but by the time I was getting my DEA license, I was, oh my gosh, don't make me do math quickly, maybe 12 years. So in recovery,
Yeah.
right? Like, so it wasn't like hey, I just went to rehab last year. I don't know about like if it would be different if that was the case. But I know doctors. I have one of my best friends is a doctor who got his medical license taken away and was in the middle of his addiction and was able to get it back with relatively soon, you know? So I know that they are, you know, just like the courts are very forgiving if you're willing to do something about it. And I was ready to do something different. And, you know, I get to go to work every day and show up for other people who deserve that help just like I deserved that help. Somebody was there for me to walk me through that, and I get the privilege of walking people through that now. And that's honestly the coolest, greatest thing that I could ever do in this life. You know, what's my purpose is serving other people.
Yeah.
That's what I want to do until I can't.
Well, and now, I mean, honestly, you going through it, I've heard some people talk about like doctors not having empathy towards certain things because they don't know, they've never been through it, or they don't understand the process. In this particular case, you can show more empathy to the people that you're working with because you've lived it, you've been a part of it, and you overcome it, which I think would be hugely beneficial.
It's hugely beneficial. They try to say, can you grab some water?
Oh yeah.
They try to say, don't talk about your personal stuff when you're a prescriber or a therapist or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
There's a, and I understand that logic and that argument, but there's a part that really connects me very quickly with my patients. I don't always tell people. It's not like I wear a badge saying, hey, also I'm an addict.
Yeah.
But there are times, especially when I have my very sick patients who don't think that anybody could possibly understand what they're going through, to be able to say, no, I know exactly what you're going through. I actually do. It makes a huge difference. And I feel like the more times I've done it and realized how much of a game changer that's been for some of my patients to be able to have that extra support and me being willing to be vulnerable, even professionally, has made a huge difference for them. So I'm a believer of like, hey, listen, you got to do what's best for your patient. And sometimes that's sharing some of what you've been through. Because we're all human beings, right? We all just want to.
Well, and I think sharing, like, again, this is one of the reasons why I kind of leaned towards doing this podcast. I was lucky and I got to hear multiple stories on a daily basis. And there's and I was like, there's stories that need to be told. There's stories that need to be put out there for people to understand, because there's benefit in everybody sharing their life experience. There's benefits in people sharing difficult things they've been through or successes that they've had. And so, I don't know, I think that even though, it's not something you're probably walking in and being like, hi, I'm Dr. Brown and blah, 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 blah. Like, let me tell you a story about what I've been through so that you can understand.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you're not doing that, but if there is a need for it,
right,
it's there and it's available, and it can show people that are needing help that there's hope.
Yep.
If that makes. And I think that
Yep.
that is a very powerful thing. And I think, you going through that, even though you can look back and be like, what was I thinking? It's made you who you are, and who you are is perfect. So.
Okay, not perfect. No. Perfectly imperfect. That's fine. I appreciate
imperfect.
that. Again, you're super generous. I'm super grateful that I get to do what I do. I'm grateful that I figured it out, and and recognize that, hey, listen, I'm still an addict. At the end of the day, recovery is still number one to me. I lose all of this stuff. Being a doctor is so cool. It actually really is. It's so cool. But it's a side note. That's just what I do for work. Like, that's not who I am. Who I am is somebody who really wants to help people, and somebody who's struggled with a severe addiction that doesn't ever want to go back there. And if I have to live every single day reminding myself of that, that's what's working for me so far, and that's what I'll keep doing.
So what would be, just because, I mean, the haircut, we're finishing up.
Haircut looks amazing.
Looks wonderful. What would be, I mean, I don't know, I guess I would I would ask you to give like your advice to somebody that's maybe where you were, that's struggling, or what would you say to people? Like, what would be the advice that you would give, having gone through all of your experiences now, if you could talk to whoever it might be?
To an addict, you mean?
Sure.
Don't give up. Don't give up. We recover. We overcome. You can do amazing things in this life if you learn to overcome that addiction. We are unstoppable once we figure out, because it will be the hardest thing that they ever do. Yeah. It will be the hardest thing. And then everything else is gravy. Seriously, it's
That's
true.
awesome.
It's true. So yes, my advice is there's help. There's hope. You can find that. Just hang in there.
That's awesome. Well, thank you.
Thanks.
I cannot thank you enough.
That was nice. I didn't know I was going to share my story, and here I am. That's awesome. That's great.
But no, I just think that's, we didn't even get into a lot. A haircut's only so long. I feel like maybe we should do your color and then do all the rest of it too. But I appreciate you sharing, because it is one of those things that I think people need to hear.
Yeah.
Success stories are always amazing. Failures are amazing too, but we can learn from everything. So thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Thanks for being the best version of you that there is. So,
that's nice. Thanks,
awesome.
Mike. Appreciate it. Thank you.